We've got some amazing questions today. The main one is on standing crust pies. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with Jas Townsend and Son. So here's a follow-up from last week's Q&A. It's Kelly White, and when I said I wasn't sure where I knew where to go from there, he's responding here. He says, I guess the real question is, did you start the company or take it over from your father? My father did start this company way back in 1973, and that little kernel of an idea of the company, it was actually called Casa de la Luz. A year or two later, he changed the name to Frontier Lanterns, and we started doing things very similar to what we do. It wasn't until, I'm not sure what date it was, I think it was in the mid-'80s that we changed the name again to Jas Townsend and Son, which it is now. And I basically took over the running of the company from my sister in somewhere around 1995 or 96. I hope that answers your question. This question comes in from the honey gingerbread episode we did several years ago. John Henderson. If one doesn't want to go through the trouble of obtaining pearl ash, is there a substitute formula for using can you use basically baking powder or baking soda instead? So pearl ash is potassium carbonate. And what we're trying to achieve here is something close to that. And the closest thing you're going to get is probably sodium bicarbonate. It's a very similar compound. It's going to react similarly, but it's going to have extra carbon dioxide to it. So when you use baking soda instead of pearl ash, you get something that's even lighter and fluffier than what the original recipe was kind of intended to use. But many of these recipes that used pearl ash would also say right there in the recipe, you can use pearl ash or saleratus. And saleratus basically is sodium bicarbonate. So many of these same recipes, they said you could use either one. So this question is from Michael Miranda, and it's from the Baked Apples episode that we did. I'm not sure if you've addressed this question in the past or not. Was it more common for sugar to be purchased in a cone wrapped in paper rather than loose granulated, perhaps in a linen bag? Sugar in the 18th century, the vast majority of sugars were not in any kind of a powdered form. They were going to be in some kind of solid form. We sell these little sugar cones or sugar loaves. In the 18th century, their loaves would have usually been much larger than that. Some loaves standing 3 or 4 feet tall, giant sugar loaves. But these smaller ones were almost always wrapped in this special blue paper. The sugar many times was a white sugar, but it was in that hard form, and you would need something like sugar nippers or sugar pliers to break off pieces of that sugar. There were other forms of sugar like muscovado sugar and other kinds of brown sugars. Again, they were in sort of like that solid form. I'm hoping to have a very, very sort of outlined sugar episode coming up later on this year. So for more sugar information, you're just going to have to wait for that. This one's from the most recent episode with Ivy doing the date turnovers. This is Milborough Mutter. He says, what, no nutmeg? I'm shocked. Actually, nutmeg would have gone really well in those. So I would suggest if you're going to give it a try, you might put in a pinch of nutmeg. I think you'll find it really good. This one, again, is on that same episode. It's Hungry Goonch. I think that's the name. Would figs be a good substitute for the dates? Could I use fresh figs? Well, I think figs would definitely be a good substitute here for the dates. I don't know about fresh figs.
I think so.
Fresh figs. I would give it a try. If you try these out with fresh figs, make sure to leave a comment. I would love to hear about that experiment. This one's from Keith Marsteller. It's from the Baked Apples episodes. Would any type of apples do? No is the answer. That some apples are not going to bake well. They really are eating apples. Do not try to use Fuji apples, or probably Macintoshes would be very too soft in this situation. And of course, Red Delicious, they aren't good for anything, so don't use that. For ideas for 18th century style apples, Susan McClellan Plastid's blog called Bites of Food History, she did an article, I think it was late last year, on apple varieties from the 18th century. I'll put a link down in the description section if you're interested in those apple varieties. This one, I've got two good questions on the standing crusts. This one's actually from the 18th century onion pie episode, and the question is, do you think this might go well in a standing crust? In other words, could we do an onion pie just like that, like we did in a standing crust? Especially since the recipe for this onion pie was huge. I mean, it was like 4 or 5 pounds worth of ingredients when you get done layering all these things in. And nobody's got a pie pan, at least today, nobody's got a pie pan that big. And so that really does kind of call out for the idea that this likely was baked in a large coffin or a large standing crust. So yeah, I would think it would make a great standing crust experiment. It would be a big pie. And here's a question from R.L. Maiden. And he says, John, I understand that the pork pies are a traditional kind of standing pie crust, but what other kinds does one make? Usually these kind of standing crusts and these coffins were savory kinds of pies. So you put, meats. The onion pie was a good one. Vegetable pies. Those are the kinds of things. And they were using it as a sort of a baking dish. These pie crusts weren't necessarily eaten. That wasn't really what they were intended for, but as a way of cooking it and trapping all these liquids in there with the items and not just having it run away like it would in a different kind of pan. So she's got some other questions. Do you keep it cool when you're using a form, and should the form be chilled? Obviously, it depends on the kind of form you're trying to create with this. If you go back to the standing crust pie episode that we did, where we made the coffin style one, we actually constructed it out of pieces, and you had to let that chill a certain amount so that you could form it, and it would keep its shape. So really, the idea here is that when you first make the crust, it's very, very soft. It won't hold its shape at all. But if you let it chill too much, it starts getting very, very hard. So you have to catch it in that middle state, depending on the kind of form you're trying to build. So you're going to let it cool a certain amount. As soon as you feel like it will hold the form and it's still formable, that's when you're going to use it. And here's another question from the same comment here. Would one even make a fruit standing pie? Usually fruit pies and these sweet little things were made in tart form. They were much shallower, and they didn't always have a top. But usually on these standing crust pies, because you're using it as a baking dish and you're trying to hold all these liquids in and sort of steam it at the same time you're baking it, they usually do have a top crust to them. Here's a great question. This is Amana Haas. He says, is there a website or a place where I can look up rendezvous and festivals? I'm interested in getting involved. In fact, we're working on a project to solve this question or to answer this question right now. It's called livinghistorynetwork.com. You can go there right now. There's at least the skeleton of the website already up and functional. It's meant to be, at least right now, a calendar of events that are living history events, and a directory of living history type historic sites and museums. We are there on the front page is a little video kind of explaining what we're trying to do, and a little form down below that you could fill out to help us get back in contact with you if you are either someone who wants to use a site like this, maybe if you're an event coordinator or a historic site person who wants to get your things listed there. Please check that out, fill out that form. Thank you especially for all your kind encouragement to Ivy in the last video. So many great comments, and very encouraging to help someone, want to keep going with what she's doing. And I do want to encourage Ivy. I think she did a great job, and hopefully you'll see her in more upcoming videos. Again, thank you for your great encouragement in all that we do here. Your sharing of the videos. If you go to the website or you request a catalog, again, thank you for all you do to help us do what we're doing right now. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you're a new viewer and you haven't subscribed, press the subscribe button up here. That'll take you to a spot where you can subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching.